Hello and welcome back to the Bacon Bites. My name is Seth Bacon, and today we're going to be reviewing just the first tab in the system settings. There's so many settings when it comes to the system settings that we can only have time enough to cover the first tab in this episode, and then in later episodes we're going to cover the other tabs. So let's get started. So if you remember in episode 2, we went ahead and went over the personal options. So what we're going to do is now review the system option. So as a system administrator, things that we can change. I'm going to go ahead and change it from this field service dashboard to go to settings. And from settings, I'm going to go to administration. So here what we're looking at is the different settings that we can do at a system level that are going to impact all users. Remember before when we went up here to the cog, we were looking at options, and that was the personal options. And so today we're going to look at system settings. So let's go ahead and click on that system settings. When this comes up, we're just going to go over the general tab today. There's a number of different items on here and that we're going to go quickly through. And so I want to make sure that we give enough time for each one of these tabs. A great resource when going through this is going to be the system settings dialog box, the general tab. So again, this is documentation that Microsoft has put out. So this will have a link down below. And so be sure to reference that if you have any questions about the specific settings that we go through today. Okay, first one. So again, one of the things to remember is that the environment that we're showing right here is version 9. So with version 9, there was a number of different features that came out. So be aware that this is version 9, that you may not have these same features in your environment, especially if you're in 2011 or 2013. Well, most of these features may not be on your system settings. So things to be aware of and things to be excited about when you upgrade. So this first one here is the ability to wrap the text. So what this allows us to do is wrap longer labels. And so often what happens is users want to see a longer label. And so they want a longer label in a smaller area, right? So they want the physical street 1 address to be a label, and at the same time, that's really long to put in a small label field. And so what Dynamics 365 and Microsoft is now allowing us to do is go ahead and say, okay, even with those long labels, let's go ahead and wrap them. Again, I wouldn't recommend writing paragraph labels. Again, those should be very short and concise and allow people to understand what they need to enter in there. And the other way I would recommend doing it is putting information in the description. And so we'll review that when we talk about fields later on. The next one we see here is enable autosave on all forms. Autosave is a new functionality that came out with 2013. What that did is automatically saved records instead of having to go up and click save every time you needed to make a change. While this was beneficial and helpful in a lot of cases, it required different ways to write JavaScript because now this autosave function is going to run every 30 seconds. So if there's a business reason not to have the record automatically saving, then you can go ahead and disable that here. Just remember that if somebody makes an update and then navigates away, that it will not autosave. It's going to prompt them saying you're navigating away. Are you sure? Yeah, you've made changes. Are you sure you want to close this tab or navigate away? Next, we have set Skype for business options. And so what that allows us to do is enable presence. And so if you think about it, when you're working with somebody and collaborating with somebody, being able to see, are they online? Are they away? Are they do not disturb? And so I can quickly see that if I'm working with an owner of a record and I want to say, hey, a datum, the owner is Bob. Let's go ahead and reach out to Bob and be able to connect with him through Skype. And so let's enable that presence. And so there's reasons to do that and not to do that. And again, that's controlled here at the system level. Next, we see how is the full name format. So we can have different names. Sometimes we want the last name and then the first name. Sometimes we want the last name, first name, and then middle initial. And so what we can do is we can set that up here. One thing to note is when you set this up, it only impacts future records, new records that are being created, or if a record's been updated with the last or first name, then it's going to impact those records. It's not going to go back and impact older records. So things to note, if you've already set this up and you need to change this at a later date, there's ways to navigate around that and make that update old records, but that's definitely a manual process. So something very, very important that you want to review and go through when you're first setting up Dynamics is making sure that that's consistent and making sure that you know why you're setting it up a certain way. Next thing we have here is the currency field. So how precise do our decimal places need to be? In the US, typically it's 2 decimal places, but maybe there's a need to go multiple decimal places beyond that, or maybe there's no need for a decimal place at all. So at a system level, we can set that here. Next, you see set whether assigned records are shared with the original owner. So if I reassign a record from Seth to Bob or Seth to Sally, does Seth still get to see those other records? Maybe I was working on something and the record got reassigned. Do I need to worry about the sharing of that? Again, maybe it was across business units. Maybe it was across divisions or something like that. And so security may be a concern. And so again, we can have that automatically share with the previous owner if that was something that we want to do. Next, you see set blocked files extensions for attachments. So again, when we look at notes and we look at attachments, what we can do is go ahead and block specific files, either because they're going to be too large, and so we want to have those files saved in SharePoint or in a file server somewhere, or if there's security concerns around the files that are being uploaded here. So different things that you can go ahead and set. There is, on occasion, reasons that you want to add additional ones or go ahead and remove specific ones because it makes sense for your business. So you do have that ability here to dictate what files get uploaded. Next, we have the currency display option. So we can go ahead and again say, are we going to show the symbol of the currency? Are we going to show the code of the currency? And again, that's at a system level. Next, we talked about relevancy search, and we've mentioned this a couple of times, and we're going to have a longer video on the relevancy search specifically. But again, we can set up and enable that relevancy search here that's going to replace the global option set. Speaking of global option sets, we can enable quick find record limits. So again, do we want to limit how many records are going to come back, or do we want to not limit the records that are coming back? Things to be mindful of there, again, is how is the user experience going to be impacted? If you say don't limit the records that are going to come back, if they just put in wildcard and then the letter A, that's going to return a lot of record, and it's going to go across multiple things. And so it's going to slow down that user experience. Typically, what you'd want to do is go ahead and limit that. And so what that's going to do is improve the user experience because the system's not going to take as long from their perspective. And it's also going to help them better understand and better find records because it's not going to show them thousands of records. It's going to show them a limited number of records. After that, what we can do is go ahead and select entities for categorized search. Again, this goes back to that concept of when we're looking at the global search, what record types do we want to return? So maybe we created a custom entity. How do we bring that custom entity into this global search capability? And that's where we can go ahead and find those custom entities, select them, and then add them. And so we'll see later on, after we've created some custom ones, how we can come back in here and update that. So we'll go ahead and hit cancel at this time. Next, we have enabled Bing Maps. And so by default, we've disabled that. What happens is when you enable that, it does prompt you and say, hey, you're going to be sending the information outside of your system. Are you sure you want to do that? Again, this is something to be very aware of when you're talking about GDPR. How are people using your data, and where is this data going from your system outside to another system? So things to be aware of. And so you can enable Bing Maps. It's going to show on the account, on the contact, as well as other places that you can enable it. The other thing you can do is go ahead and set the default country and region code. So again, this is at a system level. Last time we looked at the personal options. And so each individual person can have their own default country and region code, but we can set that as a system level. We can also set telephony. And so the idea of click to call. And so we can have a phone number in the system, whether it's a web browser, and be able to click on that phone number and it automatically dials our phone for us. And so that's a great feature. And again, currently it's only available for Skype for Business, which was formerly known as Link. Next, we see here again, the Dynamics 365 message, be able to download the app. So if I wanted to download it for the tablet and such, do I want people to be prompted for that? And so I can go ahead and say yes, go ahead and prompt people to be reminded of the app. Next, we have the ability to help users based on the entity that they're on. And so if we want to create a custom help, we can go ahead and say, okay, click here, and it's going to go to a specific URL that's associated to this environment. So that way they can quickly get more information about that. So maybe we want to put out knowledge base articles or how-to videos and stuff like that. That question mark over here on the top right, we can go ahead and change that to, instead of going to the general one, maybe to something specific to our organization. So that way we can quickly improve the information that they're getting, as opposed to general Dynamics information, they're getting specific information about our organization. One of the other things that we've talked about and mentioned is the ability to enable learning path. And so we're going to talk about that later and do a full video on that. But at the same time, that's going to be a system setting here. Disable social engagement. So again, another full video that we'll be doing around social engagement. But here we can enable that or disable that at a system level. Set whether users see the welcome screen. So again, this was something that often in 2013, you didn't have the ability. So you always got hit with the welcome screen. Next one, if you've upgraded from a different environment, you'll want to look and consider whether you need to enable the use of legacy forms in the way they're rendered. That was something that if you were upgrading from 2011 to 2013 or 2015, something that you wanted to make sure you enabled, because all your customizations and forms were using an older form rendering. And so if you're online, you don't need to worry about that typically, because all of your forms have been updated. But if you're upgrading and going through the upgrade process, something you'll want to make sure that you're aware of as you go through it. So here we can see how's the default app. So right now we're in the default app, and so we can rename that. We can change the landing page for that and what that looks like. After that, you see set the default card state for interactive dashboard. So whether we are displaying those cards and expanding them based on the state or collapsing them. And again, remember when we're talking about state and dynamics, it's not the state or province. So the state of Washington or a Florida or a Texas, it's the state of is this active or deactive? And so what is that type of state? So we can control interactive dashboards here. And again, we'll talk about interactive dashboards at a later time. Next, we have the set session timeout. What that allows us to do is dictate and control whether somebody gets automatically signed out. Currently, 1,440 minutes is 24 hours. And so if somebody signed in for that long, it's going to go ahead and kick them out and prompt them and to re-sign in. And 20 minutes before that, the one down below it is at 20 minutes before it's been 24 hours. It's going to say, hey, you're about to be kicked out of the system. We can set that to a shorter period of time so the sessions are not as long. And so again, helping us control security around that. The next one is set inactivity timeout. So if somebody leaves a browser open overnight, that's when they're going to start hitting the 24-hour period, right? Nobody's actively working in Dynamics 365 for 24 hours. So next we have that set inactivity timeout. So what we're able to do is that based on inactivity after 30 minutes, after an hour, go ahead and sign them out and force them to re-sign in. And so again, that's something from a security perspective that IT will typically have recommendations and have standards around that. The same thing happens when you're on a desktop. And so after 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, typically your desktop will lock itself. And so that's similar here in the web browser. And with Dynamics, we can set that, hey, after it's been an hour of no activity, go ahead and require them to log back in. So that can be very helpful. Again, there's reasons and there's things to be careful on, because you want to, again, make sure that the user experience is good. So if somebody goes to a meeting, do they have to re-sign back in every hour that they had a browser, that they weren't interacting with it? So something you want to be mindful and careful of. So the last one is the Azure's Content Delivery Network. And again, this is something that's important that's going to be around security. And so if there's a reason that you guys need to have a whitelist, and so only specific IP addresses can access Dynamics 365, you'll actually want to set this to no. This is somewhere where I would definitely refer you back over to the system settings information. Again, the link will be down below, but you can learn more about that and go from there. That for your organization, that you're setting up Dynamics 365 appropriately for your environment. Entities like banks and government agencies will definitely want to review this, because there's maybe a reason not to allow people to sign in from anywhere that they have a device. Because again, maybe we want to do multi-factor authentication, or maybe we want to do whitelisting so only certain IPs are able to access Dynamics 365, something you definitely want to check out. So that's a quick rundown of the general tab on the system settings. Again, these are system settings that go across everywhere in Dynamics 365. So it goes and permeates across all users and all business units. And so it's something definitely to review and to understand. I guess the biggest key takeaway that I would recommend is understanding when you're starting out, what is the name format? I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people will set up or forget to set up initially, and so they'll forget about the name format. Other things, again, blocked extensions is something that's important. And then finally, the last one I would definitely highlight is the select entities for the categorizations. Again, these are the different entities that we want in that global option, or the global search, excuse me. And so when we talk about that global search, it really is important to be able to, hey, if we're not using opportunities or competitors, that's not something that we need to bring back. And so again, from a user experience, that's very important. We hope you enjoyed today's episode on the system settings, and specifically on that general tab that has a lot of great content. If you did, please hit the thumbs up or leave a comment down below so we know you liked it. If you want to connect to us on social media, we are on Twitter at The Bacon Bites, or connect with us at our website at thebaconbites.com. If you like this content, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that way you're notified the next time we upload a video. And until next time, take care.